Hello and welcome to MLive's roundtable with Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who just proposed a $60.2 billion budget yesterday. She's here to give us some of the details, and she's here with our panelists. So I want to introduce to you Dave Grondlier. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan in civil engineering. He worked 35 years in the Kent County Road Commission as traffic engineer and director of engineering, and has served as both a Kent County Road Commissioner and a township supervisor. This is Candace Crutcher. She is a senior studying political science and history at Eastern Michigan University, where she serves as student body president. You know Governor Whitmer, I'm assuming. And then next to her is Susan Wakefield. She worked in public education for 30 years and is now the owner of Wakefield Consulting, LLC. So thank you all for joining us. To kick it off, I want to give the governor just a couple minutes to talk about what's in this $60.2 billion budget and some of the big changes that you're proposing.
Sure, well thank you, and I appreciate all of you making time to have this conversation. One of the highlights of the campaign was sitting down and doing something similar to this in Lansing, and I think that this dialogue is really important, so appreciate you making time to do this. So yesterday I introduced the state budget. The state of Michigan budget is about $60 billion. In that budget, though, the part that we have discretion over is about it is $10.7 billion. It has not grown in 20 years. So all of the other things in the budget are restricted dollars that we can't change how they are spent. But the general fund is where we fund things like the state police that keep us safe, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, which protects us and oversees kind of food quality in Michigan. Everything from mental health services to infrastructure investments when it comes to like water lines. So $10.7 billion, that hasn't changed in 20 years, means that we've not grown, even though the expense of everything has gone up in that same time. And so that is why we see roads that are crumbling underneath our cars, why we see communities that can't turn on their tap and drink water, why we've got outcomes for kids in the education system that are trailing the rest of the country. We have moved money from places that it should have been to fill potholes instead of rebuilding the roads and investing in our skills. And so the budget that I've written actually raises revenue, so we rebuild the roads the right way, so that our infrastructure is sound, so we're safe on the road, so that Michigan's a place that business will come and invest in and grow here. And when we do that, we're able to get the dollars that were stolen from the school aid fund back into schools. So it represents the biggest investment in education in a generation of Michigan kids is in the budget that I introduced yesterday, and I'm really proud of that because we've got to make an investment in taking us from the back of the pack to leaders again, and closing the skills gap. So these are all fundamental pieces of the budget that I introduced. It's not going to be easy. One of the questions I got in reaction to the budget was, so you want to raise the gas tax? I said, no, I don't want to raise the gas tax. But the fact of the matter is, after 40 years of disinvestment in infrastructure, we have to fix the problem. We've had a series of politicians that didn't want to fix it or weren't honest about the magnitude of it or just were incapable of getting it done. We have to do it before it gets so bad it's unfixable. Every day we don't, it deteriorates further. And we're shortchanging other things that really matter, like the education of our kids and closing the skills gap and making sure that people who go to Eastern Michigan can have an affordable degree. So these are pieces of the budget that I introduced, and we've got a lot of work to do. It's not going to be easy, but it's really important as we look toward the future of the kind of state we want to be.
All right, well thank you so much for that overview, and your first question is from Candace.
So Michigan has the worst roads in the nation, but about 1,000,001 jokes. So how exactly did we end up here?
Yeah, well, I think that's an important question. I'm glad you asked it. So we've had for 40 years policies that didn't reflect and build in inflation when it comes to investing in our roads. We've had incremental changes when it comes to the gas tax, for instance. But other states have built in inflationary measures. We did not. And so while the cost of everything's climbed, our ability to pay has not increased. And so to fill potholes, we've taken money out of schools, we've taken money out of the general fund, which used to go toward college, university degrees, which used to go to K-12. We have stolen from different parts of the budget, and so we're not doing any of it well. We're not actually rebuilding roads, we're not funding education, we're not ensuring that your four-year degree is affordable, and we're now at a crisis point. The national standard for what roads should be is 90% of your roads should be in good or fair condition. Right now in Michigan, we're at 78% of our roads in good and fair condition. And it's not like a status quo question where if you do nothing, it'll remain that way. It's deteriorating. If we don't take bold action now, it'll be down to 65% in just 2 years, 60% 1 year later. So this is precipitous. And if we don't address it with this particular gas or fuel tax, or if we don't have $2.5 billion to put into it, it'll get so expensive and it'll get so dangerous that we may never recover from it. And that's why this budget is kind of totally centered around fixing roads, closing the skills gap, educating kids, and cleaning up water. The fundamentals that I think everyone across our state needs and wants their government to provide at the very least.
Dave, did you have some roads questions you wanted to?
Dave could probably answer the roads questions.
That's true.
Well, I can't answer this one, so I'll ask you. Michigan allows truck weights of up to 164,000 pounds per vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That truck typically would be, it's 11 axles, so you got 2 trailers that have 4 axles on them each for 8, and then you get the 3 on the tractor. But it's 164,000 pounds that you can carry on it. Generally, that's all in there, rocks or whatever, and they go down the roads. Our adjoining states allow 80,000, 1/2 or less than 1/2. There's a little exception to that. I don't know how this ever happened, but west of Toledo in Ohio, they allow the 164,000 pound truck in 3 counties so they can drive into Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's drive-in, so they must be selling a product or something that Michigan needs. Twice as much. It's probably one of the reasons that our roads aren't so good, because the loads are double what they are in Wisconsin, Indiana, and Ohio, who are adjoining states. I think we should do something about that to reduce those.
I do think that we should, for Michigan to stand out. Unfortunately, so I went to the National Governors Association meeting about 10 days ago in Washington, D.C. Governors from across the country, Republican and Democratic alike, came together, and it was striking how similar the issues are that we're confronting as a state. Infrastructure and skills gap. And yet, while everyone's focused on investing in these areas, and so many governors of both parties are pushing forward with fuel taxes to pay for infrastructure, we're starting so much further behind where other states are. So while the issues are not unique to us, we're uniquely poorly positioned. So we've got a lot of ground to make up to be competitive. When it comes to truck weights, I think that is one other place where we are uniquely behind where the rest of the world is. And there's no question that the weight of a truck on the roads is going to be some sort of a contributing factor. Now, there's debate about how much they contribute, and I don't know how you ever prove exactly what that is, but I believe that is a part of the problem, which is why the gas and diesel tax is going to be really important, so that trucks are paying as well. But ultimately, bringing that weight down, I think, is something that makes sense.
So generally, 1,000 cars are equal to 1 truck. It's a general thing. I mean, depending on not the 164,000 pound truck, but generally it's
for the weight, for the damage that is done, 1,000 cars to
1,000 cars per truck.
Per truck at our weight limit or at a different state's weight limit?
It probably at the 80,000. Our legal weight is 80,000, except for these 11 axle haulers.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, I told you could answer these questions.
I do have a couple questions coming in from our Facebook audience as well, and feel free to submit more of those, everyone. So this one is, what's going on with the $1.5 billion that is supposed to be coming from the current gas tax? Why do you need even more?
So every engineer that's looked at our roads, whether it is the national organizations or it is our experts at MDOT, will tell you that we are underfunding what the need is with regard to our roads by $2.5 billion annually. When we do this, the cost of actually fixing the roads continues to rise because we have more roads that are beyond repair, that they have to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. We've got more and more roads falling into that condition every day that we don't make this type of an investment. The legislature 3 years ago put some more money into roads and conveyed to the world that the problem was solved. It just slowed our decline. It did not solve the problem. One of the slides that I used in my budget presentation showed the 90% and kind of our decline and what it's going to take to get back up to 90%. We can do it in 10 years with the kind of investment that is reflected in my budget. The problem is it's still going to take 10 years to get back to the national standard, and it's going to require that kind of an investment. This is what happens when you, for 40 years, don't make the regular maintenance and rebuilding that should have gone along the way. We've gotten ourselves into such a mess, and I'm tired of politicians that want to sugarcoat something or want to spin a insufficient solution as though it fixed a problem. It has not, and I think the people of Michigan deserve a real solution, and that's why I put it on the table. It's not easy. It is not going to happen overnight. It is not insignificant what we're asking of the people of our state, but the price will go up in our safety, in the absolute cost, in foregone investment opportunities into Michigan if we don't tackle this now.
So our readers are also wondering about some creative solutions. 3 have come up. One is using lottery money for the roads. Another is toll roads, which seems to be a pretty popular one. And also using money from the recreational marijuana legalization. Can you talk a little bit about what other options you consider?
Sure. So because of the size of this, it's $2.5 billion annually. There are not many parts of our current tax code where you could make some adjustments and raise that kind of revenue. There just aren't. The budget director laid out what other options might look like. None of them were more palatable than a user fee like a gas and diesel tax. The state lottery, I know people are suspicious that those dollars are bigger than we think they are and that they're not all going to education. I hear it all the time. I understand the suspicion. And part of the problem that we have in Michigan is that we've been moving money around from where it's supposed to be intended. So no one trusts government. No one believes that when you raise a dollar that it's going to go to where it's supposed to. And that's why we wrote this budget this way, to get fuel tax dollars into roads, to have universities funded out of general fund, which is where they traditionally were, and to have K-12 money going into K-12 schools. Right now, there's such a shell game going on that it feeds into this distrust. The lottery money goes into education right now. Education is woefully underfunded in Michigan as it is. The marijuana taxes could raise a decent amount of money, but we're probably talking about $150 million. Our problem on roads is $2.5 billion. And so all of these are pieces that are important to a thoughtful budget that is forward-looking, that invests in the things that matter, but none of them can supplant the kind of revenue that we need in order to actually fix the damn roads.
I just
sorry, I had to get it.
Tolls.
What was it? Oh, tolls. So I think one of the interesting things is in Ohio, Republican Governor DeWine has proposed an 18-cent gas tax increase in Ohio. And Ohio has a lot better roads than we have. And they have toll roads too. So they're struggling to fix their infrastructure, meet their infrastructure needs. Toll roads is something that we may have a conversation about especially when it comes to bridges. There might be something there, especially with the heavy trucks. So there's a conversation around that right now. But as a peninsula state, which is a great thing, right? We have more freshwater lakeshore than anywhere else. But as a peninsula state, people don't cut through Michigan the way that we do Ohio and Pennsylvania and Illinois. And so tolls are more complicated for us because we are a destination state.
Any more on roads from our panel? Do you want to go with another one?
Sure.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. Beside the roads, many Michigan bridges are deficient and posted with weight limits, and I didn't see anything specific for bridges.
Mm-hmm.
There's a limited amount of funding. There's a lot of competition to get money from the Critical Bridge Fund. Did you address that in any way?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, and I think you're raising something that's really important. Our bridges are in dire shape as well. That's part of why our overall infrastructure grade is a D. I think D plus overall, D minus for our roads just themselves. But we've got a lot of bridges in this state that are supported right now with temporary supports, like hundreds of temporary supports. These are bridges that you're driving under, that school buses of kids are driving over. We've seen chunks of concrete slam through people's windshields. This is a critical part of our infrastructure, and so the plan that we put on the table in my budget does increase dollars for rebuilding our bridges in Michigan as well. One of the, you raised the truck limits.
Was there a specific amount that you had in there, or just?
Well, it all
how
is
it going to happen?
It's a part of the formula that we put into the budget, and so there is dedicated additional revenue specifically for fixing bridges.
Part of the $2.5 billion?
Yes.
What we're looking at?
Yep.
Go ahead, I interrupted you.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I appreciate the question. I think it's really important. There's a bridge outside of Ford Motor Company that has hundreds of temporary supports that they use every day for all of their, the products that they're building. The cars that they're building, the trucks, and it's on the critical bridge list. And unfortunately, it's a county bridge, and so the county of Wayne is struggling to come up with the dollars to do it, and that's got to be one of the things that these new dollars go to fix.
One thing that they do is put plywood panels under the bridge so the concrete don't fall down, like you say. And the other thing is the kids get off the bus, they'll drive it across, and then you get back on it.
What?
That's cheaper though.
Well, I gotta tell you, during a campaign, you meet people all across the state. I mean, I like to campaign because I love people. I mean, it's stressful and hard, but you hear stories that stay with you. And one of the ones that really stuck with me was I talked to a woman in Washtenaw County, and she had an aneurysm and was in an ambulance on the way to the hospital, and the ambulance chose to take a longer route to the hospital because the most direct one had so many potholes in it. They thought it was more dangerous to take the shorter route when her, in this life or death situation. And so that's one of those stories that has stayed with me, because this really is about our safety every day on these roads. Not just about seeing a pothole, but if you are in that ambulance and need care, how critical the situation is to just getting people quickly to safety.
Susan, I'd like to have you jump in if you don't mind, and we don't have to stay on roads, so ask the governor what's on your mind.
Well, my background is education primarily, and so not only, the general fund's been stagnant for a couple decades, and I'm sure you're aware Michigan since '95 is 50 out of 50 states as far as growth and funding for public education. And I was a superintendent from 2006 to 2016, so we rode through the recession, and it was quite a ride.
Yep.
And cutting. I think a general comment, what dismays me at times is what has seemed like an attack on public education and a blame game. And while there's always room for improvement and work to do, funding is at the part of what's happening here. It really is. I believe in 1980, Michigan and Massachusetts were #1 on national and international measures as far as the success of public education. And Massachusetts is still hovering around the top, and we're down in the 40s. And I think all the research and all the papers will direct that to saying, well, it correlates very well with the funding, just like the funding with the roads. It correlates. There's a reason these things are happening. So first of all, in your budget, I really think there's a strong effort on your part and your administration to do some issues with equity. And could you just talk a little bit about that and your thought process through that? So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for going into education. I know that no one pursues a career in education because it's lucrative. It's a calling, and coming from a family of public educators, I recognize that and appreciate the work that you do. I was at GRPS earlier today talking with teachers and talking about my budget plan, because the budget plan actually is revolving around that, the need to make a greater investment in our kids. Michigan was the finest public education system around for a long time, and when we stopped investing and making it a priority, we watched our ranking fall. And now we've got too many Michigan kids can't read by the end of 3rd grade. The last legislature's response to that was, well, hold them back if they can't read. It wasn't, which it should have been. The answer was wrap them with the support so that they are successful. It was punish them for not being. That doesn't fix the problem. We have science and studies that tell us the thing that you do for kids in high poverty districts or with higher at-risk population or higher ESL population is to make sure they've got the wraparound supports they need. A child in a high poverty district, that same child in another district, it just costs them more to educate in a high poverty district. That's the equity piece that we've built into my budget. At GRPS, the per pupil foundation allotment, if I'm successful at getting this done, will be $398 per student, which is the biggest investment in children's education in a generation of Michiganders. Every school district will see a massive jump forward. Whether they're out of formula or not, they will see that. But we will see districts with the highest poverty make a greater, make a big leap forward, which is critical. It's not just about equal, it's about equity. And in order to ensure that our kids with the greatest needs are going to have their needs met, we've got to take this big jump forward. I encourage anyone who's watching and any of you, if you're interested, go on to the state budget website and look at the interactive map that we have. You can hover on your district or a district in your area and see what it means to you. Every one of our children will see a huge benefit if I can get this budget done. And it's connected to funding the roads through the gas tax so that all those schooling dollars that have been stolen can get put back into our K-12 system.
Well, I did use your interactive map. It's wonderful, by the way. So it's very easy to use, and it's a great thing to look at. So that's, those are all very positive steps in that direction. Because since '94 Proposal A, that was supposed to help equalize funding, it didn't achieve that. It did give landowners some tax breaks because that's how we were supporting our schools exclusively, or almost exclusively at that time. But just the recognition that those special populations require more funding. We still have never funded special education students. That mandated services, unfunded mandates again, that are, and therefore, as administration, we have to take money from general fund dollars in order to cover the mandated services needed for our special needs kids. And so hopefully, your plan, you get this through, it'll help equalize some of those things. I wanted to ask a little bit about school infrastructure. We're one of a handful, and I don't remember if the number's 10 or 12 or states that does not provide for any state funding of school buildings. And I know there's a lot going on this year and some things have to wait, but I didn't know if your administration had given some thought to that, because as you go around the state, you'll see quite a discrepancy in the quality of facilities that students have, and that does impact the quality of education.
Right.
So,
well, there's no question that the building matters if it's up to code, but also if it's a environment that inspires creativity and energy and learning and interaction. And utilizing technology. That's a critical part of an education in today's world. We have districts that don't have access to the internet. That's a fundamental right now. And so when it comes to the infrastructure, the building infrastructure, one of the things that we do address in this budget is hydration stations for districts that have old pipes bringing water into the buildings. We're taking a big jump in a lot of ways, but we still have some fundamentals that we've got to address, and I think you're touching on one of them.
Yeah, and I'm glad you highlighted the internet issue. I was up Lower Peninsula, but near the bridge, close to the bridge, at an ISD about a year ago, and I walked into a McDonald's at night, and there were kids sitting all over the floor, and I was like, what is going on here? And they all had devices and were working.
Internet.
That was the hot spot.
Yep.
These children, they don't have access to internet services in their homes, and it's sketchy in their schools when you talk to the principals up there. You know, it's hit or miss, and it's on or it's off, and that's an equity issue. It's kind of like the electrification of the country, right? In the 1930s,
right?
Everyone deserved electricity, and that really holds kids back without that internet access too.
Well, it does. You know, I've got kids in high school, and they are online doing their projects, conversing with their teacher, checking their grades. I mean, it's just infused in the curriculum, and so if you don't have access, you're missing out on a fundamental, and that means we're not preparing the next generation of Michiganders, which contributes to the skills gap that we have, which makes Michigan a harder place to have a business or to make an investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Governor, I think that Candace might have some questions too about higher education. I know that your budget proposal kind of
every time we talk about higher ed, I look at Candace too. So you're representing all of higher education.
Okay. So if we're taking money from, explain that what the money moving process for. If we're taking money from the general fund to go to K-12, that means we're cutting funding for higher ed, or no?
No. So essentially, higher education was always funded through the general fund, and K-12 was funded through the school aid fund, and roads were funded through, the fuel taxes.
Okay.
Because we haven't been rebuilding our roads, and our fuel taxes have not been rising with the cost of living, they've taken general fund dollars and put them into roads, which means higher ed was getting shorted. And so they started taking school aid fund money and putting it to higher ed. So they've moved all of these dollars, and K-12 is suffering, higher ed's not been funded well, and our roads haven't. So we're doing everything poorly, and we're playing a shell game. And I say we, not that you and I did this, but that's how it's been done. My budget, when you raise the appropriate revenue for the roads from the fuel tax, it means that you can fund the roads with this dedicated source, so taxpayers know every dollar is going where it's supposed to go, but also it gives you the ability to take the general fund money and put it back in the general fund so that it can fund higher education. When you do that, it means you don't have to steal the school aid fund anymore, so you can put that back where it's supposed to be and fund K-12 schools. And so this actually puts a lot of sanity and balance back into the budget, so taxpayers know where the dollars are going. So higher education universities would come right out of the general fund, which is where it's supposed to come out of in the first place.
Okay. Does it mean the funding would be increasing, or is it going to stay the same as it has been? Because it's been going down the last 30 years. So is it going to continue to go down, or is it going to start going back up then?
So in my budget proposal, it's a 3% increase for higher education, which is above inflation. It's not, enough to offset some of the burden that students are feeling, and that's why the My Opportunity Scholarship that I've introduced, I think, is going to be so important to help make the first 2 years of a 4-year degree a lot more affordable. It'll be a path into a debt-free community college degree for people that want to pursue that path, and opening up paths into the trades. There's dignity and prosperity in a lot of different lines of work, and we've got to make sure that we don't funnel everyone into one place, that everyone has a real path for themselves, what is the right one for them, and that they can make a good living here in Michigan, no matter what that path is.
Speaking of trades, I do have a viewer comment here that maybe you can respond to. It says, bring back shop classes and home economics. Not every kid likes computer work or high-tech jobs. We need contractors and shop workers too.
I agree. I grew up here in Grand Rapids, and one of the classes that I took, I was in typing, which they used to have typing classes. I don't know if they do that anymore, but I was not crazy about typing, and so I took home repair, which was a shop class, and I learned how to change the oil in my car. I learned how to rewire a light switch. It was a great course, and I had the ability to see if maybe that was something I would enjoy. A lot of young people don't have that opportunity now because the curriculum is so dictated by, Lansing, and I think we really do need to open up paths and start at a younger age so young people can see, hey, you can make a darn good living in this state as an electrician. Maybe that's something that would be appealing, that they would enjoy. Maybe not, but I think half the battle is figuring out what you do want to do, and the other half is figuring out what you don't. And that's why we've got to open up these opportunities for young people in our schools.
Do you foresee then any alleviating, or, and maybe this is a Department of Ed question, because the curriculum is so jam-packed right now, there's so many requirements, academic requirements on students, that there's really such a limited time in a day for a student to get the shop class in particular. If you want to do band or choir, that kind of excludes you from a lot of other courses of those exploratory. I think that's something that maybe down the road that has to be looked at a little bit to get the trades open back up.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, because every legislator went to a school, they have a tendency to think they're all experts in schools. And so I really think it's important that we're listening to experts, that we are evolving the way that the economy is evolving, that we recognize that there's not one path for everyone, just like there's not one standard. We should have expectations. We should hold schools accountable without question. Yes. But acknowledging that different kids learn in different ways, have different interests and aptitudes and passions, and that's a good thing. And letting them explore that, encouraging them to explore that at a younger age is really important. My daughters are in high school. One is, starting to think about what's next. And really there's not, and they go to an out-of-formula school that they've had resources that a lot of other kids haven't, just because of where we live. But they don't have the kind of counseling services that, were everywhere when I was going through high school in terms of thinking through what's next. Right. And what are you interested in? And so we're trying to figure out how to do that, but, that used to be in the public school, and it's been so stretched and so underfunded that that's not even available anymore. So we gotta do a better job on all those fronts. And I think going back to the investment, those are the things that we lose along the way when they shortchange.
That's right. Governor, I heard you mention a few questions ago on education not wanting to be punitive. Third grade reading is coming up, the implementation is coming up where we could start holding kids back. Are you concerned at all about that? What are your views there?
I'm very concerned about it. Obviously that change happened. I was not, in Lansing or in the legislature at the time. The mindset that you penalize kids who can't read by the end of third grade flies in the face of all the science, that a penalty doesn't mean you're going to get a greater outcome. It just essentially, I think, forces schools to keep kids who they still don't have the resources to make sure that they're successful. That's why in my budget I tripled the number of amount of money available for literacy coaches, because we want to make sure that our teachers have the support they need to meet our kids' needs. So we're not holding kids back. But a child who can't read isn't going to become a better reader because you've told them that they're bad or that you've penalized them. Their parents aren't going to get more engaged because you've made their child, pay a penalty for not reading. And so I think it's destructive, actually, this policy, and that's why I'm going to do everything I can to support kids so that they're successful and work to get rid of that law.
So you're looking for a policy change, not just a funding solution on that?
I think we have to do both. I think I understand the goal is to try to make sure that our kids are literate by the end of third grade. I just know that the means that were chosen fly in the face of science, and that we've got to get this right for the sake of our economy, for the sake of our society, and most importantly for the sake of these children.
Panelists, I'm opening it up.
Okay, I got a question on bonding for road improvements. I know the state has done that, and I don't know where the state's got their funds, but I understand there's been some consideration of the state setting up a fund. What is better? What is better for the person that needs the money that the state can offer than what the private sector can?
Yeah.
about bonding.
Well, so, bonding sometimes is a mechanism that is used to bring forward dollars that we anticipate collecting, right, in the future. When you have a known stream of revenue coming in, to borrow against it so that you can infuse a great deal of resources up front. In determining what kind of a solution I would include in my budget, we ran a lot of different scenarios. There was a proposal by a number of former legislators, bipartisan group, that proposed, 5 cents a year for, 10 years. And we ran those numbers. It didn't work unless you did some serious bonding on the front end to infuse the kind of resources right up front to change the trajectory that we're on. It's all very complicated sounding, but simply speaking, it just means borrowing against future collection. Now,
You got to set up your MTF funds as a collateral to cover the bonds, correct?
Exactly, and you end up paying more in the long run.
Yes.
But in some circumstances, it's the only way to infuse the kind of revenue. I've put a solution on the table that wouldn't require bonding because it's the kind of upfront investment that we really need. If we get somewhere short of what I put on the table, then we may have to explore that as a additional way of infusing the resources to change the trajectory.
Yeah, if I can comment, this isn't a question, but you do a road overlay and it might last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
You do a road improvement and you design it for something 15 to 25, and you do a bridge and you design it for 50. But you can do a road overlay that's going to last 5 years and you get a 10-year bond. You know what happens in 5 years.
Yep.
You got a bad road and you got a bond that you
You're still paying off. Yep, exactly. So that's why we designed it the way that we did, so we wouldn't have to bond. In a crisis, you get if you come up short, it's going to be catastrophic. So I think that's why it's important to do it right in the first time.
So we're also getting, I guess multiple people are mentioning mental health, which I think Susan had a question on, if I'm recalling.
Well, again, thank you for recognizing the needs of children. I see there's dollars in there for the foster care system and more mental health support in schools and child welfare. But because mental health is funded from the general fund, and that's been stagnant for so long, and the mental health needs in this state have just grown and grown and grown. And in some of the volunteer work I'm doing now, a concern that I have is by perhaps some legislators believe that mental health should be a local issue, that perhaps CMHs should find a way to either live within their means or within their budgets, or in some cases raise a millage, maybe a county millage or something. But the issue, again, these are mandated services, right? There's certain things that people are entitled to if they're disabled through Medicaid. Right. And it's one of those things that's been cut and isn't funded fully again, and it's just put tremendous strains on those systems. And then it all kind of just, it's all intertwined, right?
Yep.
It just all is wrapped together. So I don't know if that's something maybe down the road in a subsequent year, or what your thoughts are about that. So.
Well, there's no question we've got a lot of work to do on the mental health front. When John Engler left office, he had just eviscerated the mental health system that we had in Michigan, and we've never recovered.
We have not.
We went through, the economic crisis, and our state was hit harder than any other. So we've just never been able to recover, and we've got a lot of people who are not getting the support they need, who end up in jail, which is the worst place for you don't get treatment when you're in jail. One of the things that I did after I left office was I actually was the Ingham County prosecutor for a short period of time, and one of the things that I did early on was did a ride along with the Lansing Police Department, and I remember a stop that we made was a veteran who was in a mental health crisis, who his spouse had called and said he's dangerous and he has weapons in his car. Well, we caught up with him, and he was severely, incapable of rational judgment, and the only question was, do we take him to the hospital, even though he's dangerous, or do we take him to the prison, even though he's got a mental health crisis? There was no good solution, the ER or a jail bed, for this man, and that's really stayed with me because getting this budget passed is something that's important, protects health care gains that we've made, but we're going to need to take the next step on mental health, doing more.
Yeah.
And I think this budget represents some significant commitment to the issue and mitigating some of the crises that we're facing, but it's going to take a longer sustained effort to really make a big difference. Yeah. Thanks for, I'm always amazed at how many hats everyone wears, right? And so being an advocate for mental health too it's really important. I appreciate it.
Candace, I know you mentioned when we talked on the phone that a lot of your friends are talking about student debt right now.
Yes.
I know the governor's got a plan to alleviate that going into effect in a couple years now, but what are your questions for her around that tuition burden, I guess, for students?
Yeah, so I guess kind of with the community college, but you have the scholarship for that, or you're helping pay for 2 years of community college. How is that going to affect people who've already been through school? So are we just burdened with our debt that we have because we're caught in between of the issue and people fixing it?
Yeah, I hear you. So there was an interesting proposal that I was just reading about that a man from southwestern part of our state had suggested that young people who are starting off their careers have a phase-in of the income tax. So maybe they stay in Michigan, that they don't pay as much until they've been here for 5 years. And I think that's an interesting potential thing to discuss with regard to keeping young people like you in Michigan, especially when you've incurred debt or put this type of investment into your skills, which we need people with skills like yours. So I recognize that you're gonna, I don't know about you in particular, but a lot of people in your position are going to leave with serious debt, and we've got to do everything we can to help make that manageable for you. The plan that I put on the table goes into effect next fall, and someone I saw tweeted said, "Oh, well, it doesn't even begin this year." This budget won't even start until October 1st, and so that's why this opportunity scholarship can't apply until next fall, because I got to get it done first, and it doesn't even start till the 1st of this October. So I recognize how important it is to alleviate this, and I would love to make sure that by the time you graduate, we've got something in law that will help alleviate your burden.
Okay, I graduate in April, so please.
Okay. I got a lot of work to do.
2 months.
Are you going to be leaving with the debt? Have you taken on loans?
Yes.
I mean,
I have about 20,000. Some of my friends have between 40 and 80.
Yep.
For a 4-year degree.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Sorry, supposed to go to grad school or law school. Everyone keeps telling me to go to law school, but why would I want to go get $60,000 more in debt if there's no guarantee that I'll be able to pay it off?
Yeah.
Or be helped with that.
Sure. And that's a rational conclusion to come to. Although I do hope that you consider, because I think you'd be a great lawyer.
No, I keep telling people, write me a check first.
All right, say that to me too.
My readers are not going to let you go without asking about auto insurance. I guess there are a lot of questions popping up on this, but one representative one is, what, if any, immediate plans are there to reduce the cost of auto insurance policies in Michigan?
So there's no question that Michigan's got the highest auto rates in the country. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of the things that I ran on was bringing those rates down. I am determined to sign a bill into law that does that. There are some fundamentals that I want to see in a bill before I put my signature on it. It is ensuring that the discriminatory rate making practices are no longer permitted. You shouldn't be charged more because your credit rating's not as good, or because you're married, or because you live in a certain part of the state. We need to have some protections for people that are catastrophically injured. I think everyone wants to get fraud out of the system. That is important, and it's important on that apply both to the insurance industry as to the legal community, and into providers. So I think that we have an opportunity to do this. I know that the Republicans are talking about this too. Doing so might give people relief when they go to fill up their gas tank when we get my budget passed. So that's a conversation that I think is one that we'll have, but job one is getting the budget done.
Time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, panelists.
How did we get into that position where we're paying for people that are not insured? How did that happen, and can we get out of that?
paying for people that are uninsured.
Yeah.
Well,
And
you know,
the whatever it is, it keeps going up every year.
yeah. So you
It's
get
$350 or whatever it is.
so it's incredibly complicated, but
How do we get in it? How can we get out?
well, I mean, it's going to take a bipartisan solution to get out. You know, we got a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. We got to find some common ground about making sure that while insurance companies are receiving record profits, that we ensure that they're not able to discriminatorily make rates to ensure that people have the protection they need if they are catastrophically injured, and that we're getting fair rates. You can travel from, you know, within the span of 15 miles and get into 3 different rate zones. It's not about risk. It's about, you know, where you live, which is discriminatory, and I think that's got to be a part of the long-term solution. But we got here because they were trying to preclude lawsuits and prevent too much litigation, and created this system, and it's been exploited.
Time for one more. Any takers?
Just a general thought as I listen to this whole conversation. What's the path to help Michiganders really take pride in their state again? I mean, we have the worst roads in the country. Our public education outcomes are so poor. And it seems to me over the last 15 or 20 years, there's been this pride about we have small government and we have a tight budget and, you know, low taxes and all of these things. And this is, you know, we get what we pay for. That's kind of how I see it from the outcomes of these all important issues. And, you know, what's the plan to help everyone kind of look up and say, well, you know, maybe we need more and should do more, and it's going to cost more. I mean, I'm sure you have a team working on it.
Well, we do, and that's what this budget is all about. You know, Michigan's a phenomenal place.
It is.
There's no place on the planet like the state of Michigan. We are so fortunate, and the best part of the state of the people who call it home. You know, we're hardworking people. We care about one another. We expect government to work, and it hasn't been working for us in a while, and that's why this budget is a real honest solution where we haven't had an honest solution in a long time. It's not easy, but you know, it's something that fixes the fundamentals that help people get ahead. And when you have a level playing field, when you have real opportunity, everyone's going to feel good about who we are and where we are. I know, you know, Pure Michigan is one of those things that it's just a beautiful advertisement for who we are. We got to live up to that and create this foundation that really is where people will flock to for opportunity again.
Agree.
And we're up to it.
Yep, that's right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Governor, for joining us. Thank you, panelists, for joining us and bringing your perspectives. Thank you to our Facebook audience for all the tough questions and for joining us as well. And have a good afternoon.